Alrighty, good morning. Thank you everyone for being here and tuning in. So after a difficult year of revolving closures, our children need a real education recovery that makes sure no students fall between the cracks. That means providing students with mental health supports, special education supports, and more individual focus in class. Our education workers need to be supported, and we need to make sure that in-person learning is here to stay. A real education recovery will help drive a strong economic recovery for decades to come. Every dollar invested in education returns $1.30 to the economy. That means investing in education now is investing in a strong economy tomorrow. I'm excited to welcome the leader of the Ontario Liberal Party, Stephen Del Duca, to discuss our education recovery plan. Stephen, I'll pass it on to you.
Well, good morning and thanks very much, Amanda. It is great to see you through my computer screen still. I'm really looking forward to being back in Lanark, Frontenac, Kingston to see you in person over the next number of weeks once it's safe and responsible to do so. But I really appreciate you welcoming me back so that we can have a discussion today that is about, as you said, the education recovery that we all want to see for Ontario's school kids and for moms and dads like you and myself, my wife, and so many others right across this province that have been struggling over the past year, not to mention our teachers and our frontline education workers, from the custodians to the school bus drivers to the ECEs and so many others, principals. I mean, everybody who works in publicly funded education in your community and right across Ontario have just had such a brutally tough year. And I don't think any one of us ever wants to repeat this kind of year ever again. Now, we all knew at the outset of this pandemic that getting publicly funded education right in the midst of a pandemic was going to be tough. But I'll tell you, Doug Ford made a tough situation dramatically worse when he wasn't prepared to make the effort or make the investment to make sure that our schools, in fact, were safe, to make sure that moms and dads had that peace of mind, to make sure that frontline education workers truly felt respected and valued, and part of the consultation process to make sure that we could have a stable year. And we don't want to see that again. So Ontario Liberals over the last number of weeks have been in regular contact with all of our education partners. We've been working really hard to put together a thoughtful, responsible, and comprehensive plan for what a safe September could look like for the start of school in 2021. And frankly, lay the foundation for a stable and resilient publicly funded school system for many years to come. Today, I'd like to highlight just a few that I know are particularly important to me, and Amanda, I know they're particularly important to you as well. So first of all, we are literally, at least here in our home region here in York Region, we're literally about 36 hours from the end of the school year. My daughters, one of whom is in grade 8 and actually has her virtual graduation today, and the other who's in grade 4 finish up school tomorrow. I know they're really excited about that. And I know that it's a relief again to kids and moms and dads and so many others across the province that this really tough year is almost behind us. But I think one of the most important things that Ontario school kids need to experience between the end of school this week and the beginning of school in September is to learn once again what it means to be a kid again, what it likes to be a kid, what it's like to be a kid again, to be outside, to get fresh air, to have a summer of play and a summer of fun, to be out of isolation again, once it's safe and responsible to do so, and to be able to play. And so in our plan for education recovery, as I talked about laying the foundation for September, what we've included is a $100 million investment because we know there are thousands of Ontario families in every corner of Ontario, including in Lanark, Frontenac, Kingston, that can't afford and can't access summer recreation programs. And I don't think that's good enough at the best of times, and these have not been the best of times. So we've set aside that funding, that investment, so that kids who would otherwise not have access to summer recreational programming will be able to access it. Secondly, I want to talk about class sizes. This is such an important topic of conversation. I've heard it in speaking with parents across the province. I've heard it from students, certainly heard it from teachers, and again, others who work in the system. We know that we have significant learning gaps that have materialized during this pandemic. And, that's understandable, again, given how tough it's been. We want those learning gaps assessed, and we want to make sure that those gaps are bridged as quickly as possible. One of the best ways to do that is to make sure that our class sizes are small and manageable. And so the Ontario Liberal Plan for Education Recovery calls for a hard cap across the board of 20 students per classroom, which means that that in-person attention and instruction that our kids will be receiving will be that much stronger. They will be able to, those that have the learning gaps, and I suspect many of the kids will after this year, now those gaps will be bridged, and those kids, our kids, will be set up for success. I want to talk a little bit about ventilation and whether or not the schools that we're sending our kids to are physically safe and healthy for them and for everyone else who works in the classroom or around the classroom. We, a number of weeks ago, talked about the need to invest, we as Ontario Liberals, the need to invest $8 billion over 5 years, starting after next year's election campaign, should we get the honor of governing Ontario. And that's a commitment that I'm really proud of. $8 billion over 5 years in new money to deal with the state of good repair backlog, to make sure that our schools are physically safe, to make sure that in many communities, we have new schools that where there is a need that need to be built. But over the next 8 weeks, 10 weeks, 12 weeks until we have the start of school for September 2021, the Ontario Liberal Plan for Education Recovery calls for a provincial matching of the federal government's $525 million to make sure that air quality, air ventilation is as strong as possible. We saw stories in media just a few weeks ago that talked about the number of schools in Ontario that still have lead in the drinking water. These are all things that we can't wait to fix. We need to start fixing right now. And that's why our plan, the Education Recovery Plan coming from Ontario Liberals, has that kind of significant investment included for better air quality, better drinking water, and so much more on the physical side of what's taking place in our schools. I want to talk for just a quick second about special education needs. We know that prior to the pandemic, Doug Ford had already delivered incredibly reckless and dangerous cuts to special education. It makes no sense whatsoever. We know that in the publicly funded education system, there are thousands and thousands of kids who have unique special needs. They need a little bit more support that comes from professionals with expertise. We need to do more in this regard, not less. The Ontario Liberal Plan for Education Recovery includes an investment that would see us bring on 5,000 new special education professionals. That is more than one new special education professional per school in Ontario that would help those kids that have unique special needs and set them up for success. I want to talk for a second about mental health challenges. Right across Ontario, from the beginning of this pandemic to where we are right now, people of all ages and all regions in this province have been grappling with really, really tough mental health challenges because of the isolation, because of all of what we've collectively had to deal with. And our kids are not immune to those mental health challenges. That's why the Ontario Liberal Plan for Education Recovery includes an investment to bring on 1,000 new mental health professionals to be deployed out across the system to make sure that our sons and daughters, that our kids that are grappling, that are dealing with mental health challenges have the kind of professional support they need to help them get through what is, and often, far too often is, a very, very difficult struggle. Lastly, I want to talk for just a quick second about this notion of in-person versus virtual learning. Now, I know that our publicly funded system in the earliest days of the pandemic had to transition really, really quickly. And everybody in the system has worked relentlessly hard to try to make those transitions, that whiplash back and forth, that whiplash effect of schools opening, closing, all of the different models that school boards have had to contend with because they haven't had real partners in Doug Ford and his education minister. All of that needs to end. As a dad, watching closely what my daughters experienced this year, I'm here to tell you that virtual learning is not an ideal situation, regardless of how much effort is made to make it so. There will never be anything that is better for all of us than in-person physical learning in a classroom, when that classroom is safe and healthy for everybody, when the individuals who are working in that classroom, be it teachers or education assistants or special education professionals, principals, the rest of our education ecosystem, all of those women and men feel properly motivated because they are respected and valued. Nothing will replace that situation. And a provincial government and a premier needs to understand that publicly funded education is one of his or her most profoundly important responsibilities. That is something that you need to move heaven and earth. It is an all hands on deck moment to make sure that publicly funded education system is strong and it's supported and it is funded and it is resilient. And so while I understand that for this coming school year, there will still be families that are not quite sure about whether they want to send their kids back, our plan gets that. And so in a time limited window, just for this coming school year, preserving a virtual option for those moms and dads that still have those concerns is something that I felt it was important to include. But once we are through this pandemic, and I know that we are all hopeful that we are much closer to the end of this than the beginning, we need to make sure that this Doug Ford concept of an ongoing parallel virtual publicly funded system is not the direction that we move in. That is not good for anybody. It's not good for my kids. It's not good for Ontario's kids. It's not good for Ontario's economy. It's not good for any of us. And so all of these ideas are there. I am urging Doug Ford to do the right thing. The work should have already begun months ago. I suspect from what we've heard from education partners, it has not begun in a real way just yet. So I'm urging Doug Ford, take our plan, use it as a guide to deliver the kind of September that we all want to see for our kids, for our economy, for our families, again, for all of us. With that, I'd be happy to take any questions you might have.
Okay, just a reminder to the reporters on the line, if you could please just write to the chat with your full name and your outlet name if you have any questions. And the first question is Jack Howen from QP Briefing.
Hi there, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you, Jack.
Okay, so Stephen, I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about the political strategy behind holding all these press conferences on the same topic. What's the idea there?
Well, Jack, it's a great question. I don't know that it's a political strategy per se. First of all, I really wish that I was able to do these in person in different communities like Lanark, Frontenac, Kingston. I'm really hoping that as we move into July and through the summer and the reopening continues to progress, that I will be back in communities to do this kind of work in person. I'm very excited about getting back to that kind of touring. But if you look at the different announcements that I've made and then the follow-up echo announcements that I've made so far this year, you will see that they all attach themselves indirectly or directly to publicly funded education. So a number of weeks ago, and I alluded to this in my comments this morning, the $8 billion over 5 years for school repairs. Then we followed it up quickly with the Ontario Liberal Plan, Care for Every Child, for early learning and childcare. And here today, we're talking about how to get a safe start for September. These are, we're not making this up on the back of a napkin. We are hearing this from Ontario's hardworking families who are gravely concerned about Doug Ford's recklessness and moving Ontario in the wrong direction when it comes to publicly funded education in all of its facets, which again, needs to be a foundation for our future success. And I'm living it firsthand. What I've experienced through this last 12, 13, 14, 15 months with my wife, with our kids, with everyone else in our friends network and our family who've all gone through similar things. I'm going to keep talking about publicly funded education because it is so important for the society that we want to build. It is so important for the education recovery that we need to build and the economic recovery that we need to build. And I'm going to keep talking about it. And it's, to me, our province obviously is physically large with lots of demographic and geographic diversity. To me, it's important for families to hear about our plans for their kids and for all of us in as many different communities as possible. So for now, I'm going to keep doing these virtually, but as soon as we get to that point at which I'm able to start touring again, I'm going to be doing them in person, and we're just going to keep going because it's important for families right across Ontario, including in Lanark, Frontenac, Kingston, to hear about what Ontario Liberals want to do and will do should we earn the honor of governing this province next year.
Follow up.
Thanks. And I was just wondering also if you're worried at all about going too hard, about doing too many pressers and maybe starting to be ignored a little bit. And I'm also wondering how long you're planning to keep up the pace, because I don't know about you, I have a little bit of Zoom fatigue, and I feel like it must be a little more intense for you.
Yeah, look, I think the Zoom fatigue is not just you, Jack, and it's not just me. I think it's everybody. I'm happy that nobody's rung the doorbell and that neither of my dogs has started barking this morning so far. I should touch wood as I say that. Look, I'm not concerned about fatigue. The other kind of fatigue, I'll call it media fatigue. I've experienced, whether it's on this call, the one I did earlier today in Bay of Quinte, the ones that I did last week. There's a ton of local media, a lot of local and regional journalists that are keen to hear what all of the political parties, all of the political leaders have to say. And I think education it's one of those areas where so many of us, in fact, almost all of us have some kind of connection, whether you're a parent or you're a grandparent or you're a student yourself. And it's or you work in the system. And so I think it's actually, these are very relatable and relevant things that we are talking about. And I know that we're almost at Canada Day. We're almost at the beginning of the summer, kind of officially. And I know that people probably don't want to be thinking about politics. I get that. But September's not that far away. And I am gravely concerned that, like he did last September, Doug Ford will miss the mark badly because he views education as kind of a nuisance expense that needs to be curtailed or cut rather than a really, really important investment. That's not how I feel about education. So I'll keep talking about it, and as long as the incredible media we have in Ontario, I'll keep covering it. And even after the media decide they're not going to cover it anymore, I'm going to keep talking about it because that's what leadership is to me.
Okay, and I think that's all the questions on the line. Thank you.
Terrific. Thanks, everyone. Take care.